You'll find a Mets fan. Let's go. This is a Mets year. For all your Mets here, let's go. Bring it home. Bring it home. Bring it home
exciting, thrilling, awesome. Let's take a look.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Talkin Mets and Rob and another Mets off-day report right here on the channel. Once again, guys, don't forget to please hit on that like button. And thank you for tuning in to another show. And, of course, usually today, there's usually a Mets Roundtable podcast with me and the guys. But because it's the holidays, everybody's schedules are all over the place. And, obviously, it is the holidays. So, we are just going to do a solo here with a Mets off-day report. Hopefully, everybody is doing good and hopefully staying safe and enjoying their 4th of July weekend / early part of the week. So make sure you enjoy yourself and enjoy it with your families or whatever else you're doing. Christina, hello. G-Man, what up? Robert, yeah, it's been a long time. What's up, guys? So earlier today, the Mets made a trade. That was the first thing that popped up on Twitter and everywhere else, and we all know what it was. The Mets acquired Chris Flexen and Trevor Gott for Zach Meckenheim, the reliever. So people were like, oh, wow, look at this move. This is a little move. It's a very – some people thought it was an odd move. Some people didn't think it made any sense. Well, it makes sense if you really look at to take a step back and look at exactly what the Mets are trying to do here, right? The Mets aren't sellers as of yet. Just because everybody wants them to be sellers doesn't mean they have the same mentality yet. And they shouldn't as an organization yet. Should they be preparing for it? Absolutely. But as of right now, on July 3rd, and you got basically 28 days until the trade deadline, a lot can happen in 28 days. And even if you don't believe in this team and you're a very pessimistic Mets fan and the optimism is basically gone from this team, in your opinion, doesn't mean the organization is going to think the same thing. And the same reason where Mets fans were going crazy with the Steve Cohen comments regarding Buck Showalter and Billy Epler, also people didn't take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And today, yesterday, when the reporters spoke to J.D. Davis, he spoke about the unstable environment that the organization has. Basically, there is no stability within the front office and in the dugout. Why is that? Because J.D. Davis was on the Mets in 2019. Since then, until he was traded, there was 4 GMs and 5 managers in his time there. That's in a matter of 3 years, give or take. 3.5 years, around close to 4. And that's how many managers and GMs he went through. And some were interim, some didn't even start the season, aka Beltran. But he dealt with just that many GMs and that many managers. He spoke for it firsthand, and he also talked about players seeing the inconsistency and the unstable environment that was there with the Mets, and the stability that wasn't there always had people on edge. And I keep on talking about stability matters in sports, right? The best organizations in baseball, in hockey, in football, basketball, it doesn't matter what sport, freaking soccer. If there's stability up top, that means there's going to be stability in the middle part, which is like the coaches, the scouting, and all that stuff. And then it trickles down to the players. When the players trust the coaching staff, and the coaching staff trusts the front office, and the front office trusts the owner, stability actually goes throughout the organization, and everybody just does their job except looking over their shoulder that anything that goes wrong, they're going to get fired. And that is not the environment you want in an organization. Now, again, if this continues, at the end of the year, you fire who you have to fire. You hire a president of baseball operations, you give him the reins, and see what he's going to do. That is what the Mets are doing at this point. And no matter what you think about Buck, what you think about Epler, what you think about whatever trade the Mets have done so far, the point of the matter is the Mets took on salary from Chris Flexen to get a better reliever, a quality reliever from the Seattle Mariners. Now, people are like, oh, look at his ERA. It's 4.03. Yes, but if you look at his numbers as a whole, right, people only want to look at certain numbers that they want to complain about. But this is what Trevor Gott is, all right? Here we go. This is what it looks like right here, right? He has 2 home runs in 30 innings. That's very good. That's a good sign, meaning that he doesn't get a lot of hard contact when it comes to guys giving up home runs. That's a good thing, especially with the Mets pitching staff as a whole has given up the most home runs basically in baseball this year. That's a problem, so that's a plus, right? He's walked 2.5 batters per 9. That's good as well. Here's another one that should excite a little bit of people. He has a strikeout rate of 9.9 per 9 innings. So that's basically a strikeout in an inning, which it's actually a little bit above a strikeout an inning, and that is for a reliever. So that's a good sign when it comes to the New York Mets. And I'm not sure if people are typing in the chat or not. I can't see it at the moment. Let me just make sure if anybody's typing. Okay, so I see that. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I see Christina type as well. So, all right. So people are not typing, but they're listening. That's always good, too. So there you go right there, right? So this is a guy that has a high strikeout per 9, a low walk per 9. He's only given up 2 home runs, which is a good sign, right? So that is something. No, Nick, Flexen was DFA by the Mets. So, again, this was just a situation which you might see a lot of with the New York Mets at the deadline, because Cohen even talked about taking on money or trading players because the contract is already spent, with the sunk cost that he's talking about, where he already thinks that money is spent already. So what is the difference, taking in money or sending out money, right? Most of it's already spent. So what's the point? So he took on Chris Flexen's rest of the contract to get a quality reliever from the Mariners. So that's what having Steve Cohen actually does for a situation like this. And Trevor Gott also has 1.5 years left on his contract. So you get a controllable reliever for at least another 1.5 years, which is good for the rest of this year and next year. So again, if the Mets happen to not want to, are not going to be in the race at the deadline and they become sellers, maybe Trevor Gott is a type of guy that you might just get rid of as well, or you can keep around for next year as well. So the Mets, that gives the Mets a little bit of options here, right? It gives you another quality reliever that will be on the team next year if they don't flip them in a seller market, a buyer's market at the deadline, right? Especially if you're going to get rid of Robinson, if you become sellers, possibly Ottavino. So it gives you options in the bullpen as well, especially next year. And Mets Nation, how you doing, buddy? So that is the idea. That is the idea behind this trade. It automatically basically makes him the fourth best reliever in the Mets bullpen, or probably even the third if you really want to put it in perspective. Because if you look at his entire numbers, he has better numbers overall than an Adam Ottavino. So you got Raley, Robinson, and now Trevor Gott. That is a guy that the Mets can go to, and a guy, again, has a high strikeout rate per 9, a low walk rate per 9, and only giving up 2 home runs in 30 innings this year. That is a good sign. Again, will that translate? Who the hell knows? But the point of the matter is the Mets are doing little things here, especially now in this trade, where they help the bullpen just enough. Because all you need sometimes is a little bit stability in certain areas of your team. Not saying that it's going to, turn everything to roses here. I'm not that naive to think that, but you just never know, right? The Mets are 2-0 in July. They turned over that new leaf after June, the 7-19 record in June, which was absolutely awful, and put them in a huge hole. By the end of June, they ended up being 10 games out of a wildcard spot. Now they're down to 8 just in 2 days. So again, 1 week can change everything. Harlan, that's fine, 18 back, but you don't only have to win the division to make the playoffs, right? And I think, Harlan, are you a Braves fan? Because if you are, you should know better, because you lost to a wild card team in the Phillies with 87 wins last year. I guess that division didn't help. Yeah, I know. But again, I don't care. The division is pointless to even talk about. That's why I'm not doing it. Well, yeah, we'll see, Nick. That's what I'm saying. As bad as the Mets have been, that just shows you there's only like 2 teams that actually really had like a 10 to 15 game stretch where they put themselves in positions for a wild card spot, right? It is the Reds and it is the Giants. Other than that, everybody's, really not going crazy here, right? The Philadelphia Phillies are hovering around a couple of games over 500, a couple of games under 500, at 500, and the rest of the teams, well, we saw the teams, the Brewers, right? Teams like that, even the Giants. Look at the Giants. The Giants are a pretty decent team, but they're not an unstoppable team either. These are teams that, again, you go in a 10-game stretch and you go 8-2. Not saying that the Mets will, because they haven't shown it a lot this year at all, except for that West Coast trip when they went 7-3 in 10 games. If you do that, you're right back into the mix. And we do forget that we have a lot of games against the Marlins. We got a lot of games. We still got a couple of games against the Phillies as well. Those are teams that are above you right now. The Marlins are looking really well. But you know what? The Mets actually played the Marlins well this year. I think out of 6 games, they were 5-1 in the beginning of the season, right? When everybody was laughing that the Mets only beat the Marlins in the first week and a half of the season. Well, everybody looks a little bit stupid now when the Marlins actually look good and they're in a playoff spot, right? So, again, this all might be for nothing. I mean, it's very possible, but you saw Verlander and Scherzer both drop their ERAs a full run over the last 3 to 4 weeks. So that's a good sign. You see David Peterson actually showing signs of a little bit of last year, getting out of jams, which he always did well when he's pitching well. That's a good sign for David Peterson. Kodai Senga, is looking better, right? He's pitching basically every 5th day now, right? You worry about McGill, who is in the minors, see if he can fix himself. Carrasco is a lost cause. You just hope that you can keep your team in the game. And Jose Quintana is coming back very soon. And I always said this, and I said this in the beginning of the season. I think Jose Quintana is a big part of the rotation. You're going to be like, why would you say that? Because it brings stability to the rotation. The two things that I loved about Quintana throughout his career was he was durable and he throws innings. Those are two things that you always need in a rotation, even if it's not the best pitcher in your rotation. You need a guy to go out there and says, all right, you know what? I'm going to give you a bullpen a break tonight, because that's why those type of guys matter. It helps your bullpen. You know, they're not going to throw gems every time out, but you know what? When they're struggling a little bit, they'll give you 6 or 7 innings, even if it's 3 or 4 runs, because it gives you innings. It helps your bullpen for the next game when you really need a couple of guys. That's why Jose Quintana is important. And for the most part, he was always durable as well. And he actually pitched really well last year for the Cardinals. So Quintana could be a nice addition, because you know every 5th day there's a guy that you can trust will go out there and give you length. And that, I think that's important. And, you know, it will go out there every 5th day and give your team a chance to win, right? You know, I mean, you know, he's just coming back, so you're not expecting big things here. But I do think that he'll bring a little bit of stability to this rotation. Again, will it matter? Who knows, right? Crazier things have happened, right? But we always see it every year. There's always a team, not saying that I think it's going to be the Mets, because it can be another team that are around the same area of the Mets. You know, it could be a team that's, you know, that's right above the Mets that could go on a run, right? You always see a team every year. There's usually always one in the National League and one in the American League that in July and August go on a little bit of a run, and they find themselves a couple of games back of a wild card spot. And not all the time they actually make the playoffs, but they make it interesting. Yeah, JL, I mean, listen. I mean, the Braves are the best team in baseball. If not, you know, you can consider them and the Rays, you know, going back and forth. You know, I think if you look at the rosters, you wonder how the Rays are basically one of the best teams in baseball. But the Braves are just, again, I don't think anybody's shocked by that. I mean, I never chose the Braves not to win the division. I don't think that's fair, right? Even as a Mets fan who hate the Braves, I still always believe this, and I'll believe this till the day I die. I always choose the team. Now, of course, that obviously, you know, you always look at the roster again. If it's a lot of turnover, then you can have a conversation. But I don't believe you take any team out of the division title spot until somebody actually does it, right? It was the same thing with the Nationals in the 2015, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 14, and 15, when the Mets finally in 2015 punched the Nationals in the mouth and took that division that year, right? I always think you have to give the division to the team that basically is the dominant force in that division. Well, yeah, Jail, but you know this better than anybody, right? You're a logical Braves fan, right? You love your team, but you also are honest about your team, right? The Dodgers, like the Braves this year, are cruising to a division title, right? But what did that mean for the Dodgers last year, right? They cruised to the division title last year in the West. They were, it was basically known that they were going to win the division probably in the beginning of August. Like, that's how good they were. Basically similar to the Braves, right? It actually meant nothing to the Dodgers last year after they got beat by the Padres. Well, Bravos, that's the biggest thing with the Braves. And I think that's why they're so much better than they were last year, right? Even with the issues with the injuries with the pitching, right? You're starting to get guys back, but that is the biggest thing, right? We talked about that last year with the Braves. The biggest problem with the Braves last year, and I think it caught up to them in the playoffs against the Phillies, was the fact that if they didn't hit home runs, they struggled to score runs. This year, that's a totally different story, right? Cutting down that strikeout rate is huge because they were basically a strikeout home run team last year. That's how they scored the majority of their runs. This year, I mean, it doesn't matter, right? Cutting down that strikeout rate, that is huge. And I think that's probably the excellence of that team, of this team this year. Again, I mean, that doesn't mean, like I said, they are prime. They're a prime team to go all the way. I think that's fair to say, even as a Mets fan, right? I mean, come on, like it's hard to say that as a Mets fan, but you got to be realistic, right? That's how good they are, right? But they have to do it in the playoffs again, right? They got to go into the playoffs, go through those rounds, go through that bye that clearly hurt them last year. It didn't get everybody healthy for them. Strider was going through things like that as well. So, unfortunately, they actually got picked off by a hot team in the Phillies. The Braves are always better than the Phillies last year. But that didn't mean nothing in the playoffs, right? I said this time and time again. The playoffs are a crapshoot now. That's the problem, right? And I think that is the huge issue when it comes to the playoffs nowadays, because if you get caught that's going into a team that's hot going into the playoffs, you probably don't want to face them because they're always dangerous, no matter if they won 89 games or 105. A hot team is the most dangerous team because everything's clicking on all cylinders. Just because you have the best record doesn't mean you're going to go into the playoffs, burning all cylinders, running on all cylinders and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. Well, CJ, I think it helped the Astros a little bit. The only reason why is because they're young for the most part, but they're older guys. The guys that were nicked up throughout the season, those type of guys, it helped them a lot. And I think that was important for them. I think it hurt the Yankees. I think, during that Cleveland series, I think it hurt the Braves. And clearly it hurt the Dodgers. So it is it is a sign, right? They look like one of the best teams in baseball, and it's very hard to say otherwise because that's not fair to them how great they have been. So yes, once again, Trevor Gott is the guy that the Mets were looking to get that was available at this moment, where they took on money from Chris Flexen to get a quality arm in the Mets bullpen. And again, I just gave you the numbers: a low walk rate per 9, a high strikeout rate per 9, and only 2 home runs in 30 innings. That is a good sign. I know his ERA is about 4, but if you really look at his numbers, I do think that he did pitch in Seattle. The ballpark is pretty evenly matched. I think both ways. I think it's a pretty size ballpark, so you don't have to say it was a bandbox. But I do think that it's called a FIP rate, that with analytical people, but it's basically it shows the basically the hard hit rate and all that stuff and all that craziness. How people, I don't really care about that. I just know that I like the low walk rate, which I think is very important for a reliever. Like certain numbers for individual players, depending on the position, I think is extremely important. Important. Excuse me, can't speak right now. Important is the low walk rates for relievers and strikeout rates for relievers. I think that's important because of the fact you don't want a reliever coming in and walking the ballpark. And a lot of the times, relievers come in with runners on base. So the last thing you want to do is put more runners on base. And I think that's important. So we'll see what Gott can do. He will replace another scrub in that Mets bullpen, whoever that might be. We will see. So that's what I think that. Yeah, Jay, that's what I was saying. That's people were making fun of it, like, oh, look at the Mets. They made a big trade. This is going to change their season around. It's not about being a big trade because, again, Jay, we talked about this, until the cows come home when it came to the Braves, right? The Braves didn't make big moves in 2021. They basically got a whole new outfield at the trade deadline. It wasn't big names. It wasn't guys. If I would have told you that one of those guys would have won a World Series MVP, you would have laughed in my face, right? But they were the right guys. And I think it's important for people to realize it's not always about the big names. It's about the right guys that fit your team, that can help your team. It doesn't always have to be the biggest guy. And I think that's important to realize. Again, I'm not saying God is, Mariano or something like that. Like, that's crazy. But can he be a solid reliever? Because that's really what the Mets need. The Mets need consistency. They need someone who they can buck and throw out there and say, all right, I can trust this guy. With his low walk rate, I can trust this guy. That's important, right? Other than Rayleigh Robinson, there's really nobody that Buck can trust. Ottavino is a hit or miss. Drew Smith is a dumpster fire. Jeff Brigham is another dumpster fire. Dominic Leone had a stretch where he was really dominant for like 10 games. After that, he's back to what he usually is. And everybody else is just a dumpster fire as well. And again, you just brought that up. That was the big word that I keep on using with Mets fans who just want to fire the world, right? Stability matters in an organization. Just ask the Brave fans that are in this chat right now, right? There's a reason why the Braves are a very good run organization, right? Stability at the top, stability in the front office, stability in the coaching staff. You don't just keep firing people for one bad season after a really good season. That does not work, right? I just gave you the quote from J.D. Davis where he talked about the unstable environment that the Mets had, right? In J.D. Davis's tenure, it's not like it was 10 years. He was here for basically 3.5, right? 2019, 20, 21, and he got traded in 22. So not even 4 seasons considering the pandemic year, right? He had 4 GMs and 5 managers. Some were interim, and some never made it to the season. But they were a manager. So basically, he went through 4 GMs and 5 managers. That's embarrassing as an organization. For an organization that wants to find stability, and that's what Steve Cohen basically beat the drum on, is stability in an organization. If you continue to fire people just because of a half a season, nobody that is good and can run an organization, or somebody that you really want that has a good resume, is not going to want to work for you. And that's the problem. You can't be George Steinbrenner, right? George Steinbrenner was so desperate for a manager that he hired Joe Torre, right? It worked out, but Joe Torre wasn't a World Series type manager when he became a Yankee manager, right? People were scared off by being a part of the Yankees because of George Steinbrenner, right? The 80s was a lost year. That's when Steinbrenner was basically putting his hands in everything, right? And even when Joe Torre got the job, he went right before he was gonna George was gonna hire Joe Torre. He went back to Buck. It's well documented to go back and manage the Yankees again. So you don't want a guy that people don't want to work for. Again, I bring this up a couple of times already. This is not Costco. This is not Walmart. This is not BJ's, right? You can't replace a body with a body. Harlan, yes, because mathematically they're still in it. Again, it's simple math. I know you can't comprehend that, but that's okay. The whole point is the fact that the Reds a month ago were exactly where the Mets were. That's how far back they were. They won, 12 games in a row? And all of a sudden they're playing, decent, not great, right? That stretch is over. Now they have to maintain it, right? So, it's not even about the wild card for them. It's basically about the Central, which is garbage. You've seen the Phillies last year that won 87 games. Not saying the Mets are going to do that, but, the Mets are always terrible in June. Except for last year, they usually have very bad Junes, even when they are actually a good team. It's weird. Something about June, the Mets are not good. Their record is absolutely terrible. If you look back 10 years and look at their record, I think they're 35 games under 500 in June. That's embarrassing. That was after a really good June last year. So I don't know. Well, Jalen, but you see, that's why I got mad about the Philly series, because of the fact that, right before that stretch of games, they were there was 16 games before the deadline, and every team they're facing, except for the Diamondbacks, who are leading the West right now, are in front of them. That's why this stretch was so important. Like they won the series against the Giants. The Giants were the third wildcard team. So that's good. You gained 2 games on the third wildcard team, the exact team that is leading the third wildcard right now. No, it's not weird, Harlan. You said you can't comprehend that. That's the problem. You can't understand because you can't do math. Right? That's the problem. Again, that's fine, Harlan. And how many division titles they won since 95 until they won in 2021? That's a long stretch where you didn't win a championship, right? They can be elite, but that doesn't mean they're going to win every year, right? The Braves were never a dynasty, right? They weren't the Yankees. They weren't the San Francisco Giants when they won 3 out of 5 years. Can they be that? Absolutely. 22 congratulations. They don't have none. And I understand that. They don't have a lot. But again, you keep on bashing on the Mets, which is fine, right? The Mets fans do that enough. You're not hurting our feelings if you don't realize that, right? But the point of the matter is, for all your division titles, you have 2 world championships in 28 years? You should have a lot more, but you don't, right? With one of the best pitching rotations you ever had in the 90s got you 1 championship. Right? I wasn't the one who basically was dominating the World Series against the Yankees and lost. Okay, that's cute. I understand that. You don't have to tell me my history, right? Again, you can keep on doing that, but yes, I agree. But again, I'm not bashing the Braves. You see, that's your problem. You can bash the Mets. You act like the Mets fans don't bash it and I'm praising them. Like, you can't do simple math because you're an idiot. That's your problem. 8 games with basically a half a season to go, mathematically, it could happen. And I keep on saying it, you just don't listen, right? I don't think it's going to happen. But to think it's not possible, you're an idiot. Okay, that's fine. And you know what also is funny? You get blocked. You know why you get blocked? Because I didn't bash the Braves. The whole point is, I just gave you facts. Since 95, you won no championship until 2021 with all those division titles. That's a fact. That's not bash you when I give you a fact, right? I agree with you. The Mets do suck. The Mets don't have no ring since 86. I know that. I was there. I was watching. I've seen that. I lived it, right? But also a guy like Harlan, who probably only became a Braves fan since 2022, is the reason why he comes on the channel and actually trolls, because he has nothing better to do, right? You shouldn't be worrying about the Mets. You worrying about the Mets is an embarrassment as a fan of the Braves. Why are you worrying about that, right? The Braves fans on this channel, right? Bravos, JL, if I'm missing somebody, I apologize, right? We can have a conversation, right? The Brave fans subscribe to my a lot of Brave fans subscribe to my channel because I believe I'm going to be a biased Mets fan sometimes, just like you're going to be a biased Braves fan. But I'm realistic with my team. If you can't be realistic with your team, and again, it's not bashing when it's the truth, right? I kill my team all the time, right? I criticize my team all the time. I know my team's history, right? I know we haven't won since '86. Right? But that doesn't change the fact that mathematically they're still in it, right? The Reds a month ago were 8 games back, exactly where the Mets were. They won 12 in a row, and now they're winning a division right now. Again, see, and thank you for the super chat, CD. Yeah, it is an uphill battle. That's common. I never had a declaration saying the Mets are gonna go on a run and make the playoffs. I didn't say that. I said there's a chance. You know why? Because this team is actually talented. If you look at the players on the roster, they're supposed to be a good team. I'm not saying a great team. I never said that, right? I didn't think they were going to win 100 games like they did last year, 101. I never said that. I thought they were going to take a step back. I think that was realistic to think that. And again, Scherzer and Verlander over the last month have dropped their ERA a full run. That is huge for a Mets team that has struggled pitching the entire year. Right? They got a quality arm in the bullpen now with Gott, who's not great, but will stabilize that bullpen a little bit. It gives an extra arm that Buck Showalter can throw out there and says, okay, this guy is pretty good. I can trust him. He's not great, but you know what? He gives you the option other than Brigham and Drew Smith. That's important. Well, yeah, JL, you know what the difference is? The Phillies came out of nowhere in August, right? They started to get really hot right at the end of the year. Remember, it was like the last couple of games of the year where they won that wild card spot, and then they just took it and ran with it, right? The Diamondbacks have been good since basically day one, and it's pretty cool. Again, I don't think the Mets. I think they go on a run, but I think they're going to come up short. So, you're talking to a fan in the Mets that was born in '87. Okay, I never seen a championship. I seen 2 World Series appearances, and they lost both of them against the Yankees in 2000 and the Royals in 2015. So. Well, that's why they're probably going to make a trade. And again, this is the reason why when you look at it, that with the Diamondbacks, it's really going to come down to the deadline with them, because they're going to make the playoffs, even if they don't win the division, most likely. And it's just a matter of when they get to the playoffs. Are they going to have enough pitching? We'll see, right? Well, yeah, I think the D-backs snuck up on people. I think people saw the talent on the Orioles last year when they went on that mini run last year in the second half. The D-backs, I think they were probably, a lot of people thought they were still another year away, 2024. They were similar to, how can I say? Let's see, who can I think? It's hard to think that, but, JL has a point. I guess kind of like the Phillies, but the Phillies, they scuffled the entire year except for the last month and a half. Yeah, well, you know what it is with them? You just see the talent there, and that can scare you away a little bit, right? It's dangerous. But again, we all know this now. If you notice the new playoffs format, and even over the last 5 or 6 years before the new format, it's a crapshoot in the playoffs now. The best team doesn't always win. That was hard to believe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, right? It was usually the top 3 teams or top 4 teams in baseball that are usually one of the 2 of the 4 that actually got to the World Series and played each other. Now, I mean, look at the World Series appearances. Teams, right? You had the Astros, which okay, fine, right? You got the Phillies, right? You had the Astros and Braves, right? In 2020 and 2021, right? Which is crazy, right? Because the Braves weren't one of the best teams going into the playoffs in 2021, right? 2020, who cares, right? It was the Dodgers and the Rays. That was a pandemic year. I don't really care about that year. 2019, look, it was the Nationals, right? A team that choked every year in the playoffs, winning divisions like a couple of years in a row, and they basically did not sign their best player in Bryce Harper at the time. Yes, they had Juan Soto, and the following year they win a World Series. It's impossible to figure that out. Right, so it's usually the crapshoot of the Major League Baseball playoffs now is like the NHL playoffs, as I brought up before. It's a crapshoot now. Anybody who makes the playoffs, and that's why in the NHL they say just get in, because it doesn't matter if you're the 1st seed or the 8th seed. Right, we saw the Florida Panthers as an 8th seed go all the way to the Stanley Cup, beat the Bruins in the first round. The best team ever in NHL history, the Boston Bruins, and lost in the first round to the Florida Panthers that were an 8th seed, and they went to the finals. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's crazy to me. But guess what? That's what baseball is now, right? It gives other teams that are on the fringe. I mean, what it does, it kind of makes the trade deadline a little less interesting, because there's more teams that are going to be buyers than sellers. a lot more teams that are going to be buyers than sellers. I mean, that helps the teams that are sellers because you're going to have a lot more competition for the players that you're selling. But it makes it harder for the buyers because they have to determine is the price too steep to make that deal. It couldn't give you that piece that you need to go far in the playoffs, maybe even a World Series. But also, do you want to give up your future? That is the balance that teams have to go through that are going to be buyers. So it is important to realize that the New York Mets have a long way to go. Is it possible? Of course. Mathematically, it says yes, of course, right? You go back a month ago, look at the teams like the Giants, the Reds. Look at those teams. Look at the three teams that are the third wild card team and two teams behind them. I can guarantee you a month ago, at least two of those teams were exactly where the Mets were or close to it. And that's what the hope as a Mets fan is. They can go on that type of run. And I'm not talking about, right, the 2019 Mets, who were basically weren't very good, won 15 out of 16 and brought themselves back into a wild card contention when there was only two wild card teams, right? I think they got all the way up to like a game and a half from the wild card, and then they fizzled out in September. And they went on that run. And again, I'm not saying the Mets have to go. I mean, it would be nice if they go 15 out of 16 and gets them right back to a realistic opportunity. But can they go 10 out of the next 15? That helps them get closer to back to 500. And that's when you can start saying, okay, you got 75 games left, around 70 games left after the All-Star break, 75 games left after the All-Star break. That's the chance you're looking for. You want to be, by the deadline, you want to be at least 3 or 4 games from a playoff spot. That's when you have an opportunity to not become crazy buyers, but maybe solidify the bullpen a little bit more. If you want to get, a mid-level starter, you can do that if you're at that point. I always say this, and I always brought this as true. I say this all the time. If your team is not within 3 or 4 games of a playoff spot by the trade deadline, I think you should really consider selling. That's just my opinion. Again, everybody has their own opinion. Everybody might think otherwise. But if you're 3 or 4 games from a playoff spot, you have time to get back into a playoff spot. And I think that's important to realize. Well, Paul, yeah, of course they do, right? But the Phillies were also a team that couldn't get out of their own way last year, and they made the World Series, right? I can assure you it wasn't just the manager change, right? It was actually players playing to their capability. That's what got the Phillies on that run, right? They didn't make major moves. Where was that Juan Soto trade, right? Where was that for the Phillies, right? It wasn't there. They got a couple of good bullpen arms, but it wasn't crazy good bullpen arms, right? It was good bullpen arms, but it was basically the same guys playing better. And that's where you have to look at it from the Mets. Look at all the Mets that are having down seasons. It's basically all of them except for Brandon Nimmo. Marte down season. Alonso down season. Lindor, technically on base, average, and OPS is really not there. It's been going up lately. But Lindor, right? You got Lindor, Alonso, Marte, McNeil. All those guys, that's basically the core of your lineup. Those guys play a little bit better. You can just assume that the Mets will be better. The same thing with the pitching staff, right? Sanger is starting to figure it out a little bit more. Again, I just brought it up. Scherzer and Verlander got a full run better over the last month ERA-wise, so that's a good sign. Quintana's coming back. I think he will stabilize. I'm not saying he'll be great, but he'll stabilize, give innings to a rotation that needs innings. And that is the important part, that the little things can matter, right? Again, go to the last couple of World Series champions. What major move, I'm talking about big-time name, those teams got, right? Go back to the Phillies last year, right? Again, they got a couple of bullpen arms, nothing major, right? They were basically the same team that basically were the bad news Bears defensively, right? They got better defensively. They started to hit better. And they pitched a little bit better. Basically all the same guys. Right? 2021, I just brought up the Braves. Where did the Braves get a Juan Soto? Right? They got Soler, Rosario, and I'm kind of missing out on the third outfielder, but it was basically Rosario and Soler that were the big keys to their playoff run, right? And what did they do, right? They won a World Series. Again, I'm not saying they can replicate that, the Mets. I'm just saying that the big moves isn't necessarily that thing that says that's what's going to make them successful and go on a run. It can be the simple moves, the small moves that I think are important. It wasn't, yes, Cespedes was big, but you know what started the trend for the Mets in 2015? Juan Uribe and Kelly Johnson. And then, the Mets, they go out there and get Addison Reed. Obviously, Yoenis Cespedes. But the Kelly Johnson and Juan Uribe stabilized that Mets team. They weren't the best players. Juan Uribe was on his last leg. Kelly Johnson was a utility player. But they brought stability to the bench. Thank you, Duval. Thank you. Right? They brought stability. And the Braves in 2021 needed an entire outfield. That's why they got those three guys. So, again, it goes back to the Mets. Oh, hello. Sorry. My cat popped up here. Hello, Shay. Sorry, guys. There you go. So, Shay is saying hello to everybody. Hi. Sorry, he's going to go on my bobbleheads, and that's going to be a problem. He just jumped on my lap. Sorry, guys. I think he's hungry. So, we're going to he's going to jump up again. So, with that said, guys, the Mets are in Phoenix right now. Tomorrow, they're going to be playing Arizona, one of the better teams in baseball. Listen, just win, right? I don't care how you do it. It doesn't have to be pretty. Just get a W in the win column. That's all they have to do. Take it one game at a time, right? I'm going to go back to what Boomer Esiason says. Boomer Esiason says all the time in hockey, one shift, one period, one game, right? In baseball, one pitch, one inning, one game. That's what the Mets have to do. They have to focus just on that game. Don't worry about the stand-ins. Don't worry about who you're facing tomorrow. Tomorrow's game, the game that they're playing that day, that's all that should matter. And then the next day, same thing. That's what the Mets have to do to get back into relevancy. If not, well, it's going to be a long summer for the New York Mets and the New York Mets fans. So with that said, guys, my cat is hungry. So I'm going to feed Jay. And it's the 4th of July tomorrow, so I'm not going to do a live tomorrow. So with that said, guys, everybody have a great night. Have a safe and great 4th of July Tuesday. Hopefully the Mets give you a little bit something. The game's at 4 o'clock tomorrow because of the 4th of July. So with that said, everybody have a good night. Let's go, Mets. I will see you next time, guys. Have a great night. Have a good 4th, guys. Good night.